Looking at another type of government intervention now is subsidies. So same specification objectives. So a subsidy is a payment by the government to the producers. It can sometimes be to consumers, but really what we focus on in Year 1 economics is payments to producers. And this reduces cost of production and encourages them to increase output. So we're looking at anything that's going to be underconsumed in a free market. So anything that produces positive externalities, so external benefits, where the producer or the consumer doesn't take into account the full benefits of their actions. So it's underconsumed, underproduced. Merit goods as well, where people don't take into account the external benefits of their actions, or they don't recognize the external benefits or the actual benefits to them, so they underconsume it. So yeah, anything that is going to be underconsumed in the market. So this is what's happening when we apply a subsidy. It's supply shifting outwards, and the reason for supply shifting outwards is it's because it's given to the producer, and we typically only look at producer subsidies in the A-level course. So it's very consistent with the indirect tax, which was moving supply. This is subsidy, I suppose it's like a negative tax, and it's again moving supply but outwards this time, so increasing the amount of supply. So this is, a diagram's great, but this is the most important part if you're going to put a diagram into your essay or your answer, because you need to explain how it works. So firstly, it decreases the cost of production. Cost of production, really important phrase to get in. This means that supply shifts to the right. This causes excess supply because initially the prices won't automatically adjust. The excess supply actually puts downwards pressure on the price, and this increases the equilibrium quantity, which is what we're trying to do, because when we're applying subsidies, we're trying to reduce the underconsumption or underproduction. So benefits of using this is that it's using this market mechanism. We've got this phrase, people responsive incentives. So we know that when a price is decreased, it makes it much more affordable for people, and it also means that they might switch from using substitutes as well. So that's, by people responsive incentives, that's what we're looking at. So it can be very effective in increasing consumption. And if there's increased consumption or increased quantity demanded, we know that suppliers are going to respond to that as well. It also reduces the prices of basic human needs as well. So if we're applying a subsidy to something like food or education, healthcare, it may reduce the problems of inequality or inequity, which is the unfair distribution of income or wealth. Now, I've put a question mark on the end of that because you've got to be really kind of careful with this, because some subsidies, it won't actually affect inequality, because if you're giving it to everybody, then it's not really kind of affecting people's position. But you know, the reason that we worry about inequality is it means that some people, especially the ones that are at the bottom of the end of the kind of income scale or the wealth scale, we worry that they won't be able to access basic human needs, such as shelter, education, healthcare, water, food, those types of things. So, okay, it's not going to change their income and it's not going to change their wealth, but it may change their quality of living. So that's why there's a little question mark at the end of that. However, there are some problems with using subsidies. I haven't actually put the most obvious problem on here, which is that it's very expensive. Whereas a tax raises revenue for the government, this is going to cost them money. So there's obviously an opportunity cost there. Another problem is it cushions firms against competition, and so maybe there's less incentive to innovate or to reduce costs. So we've got kind of problems with productive efficiency as well. It's also, just like we went through with indirect tax, it's really hard to determine the correct level of subsidy, because these external benefits don't have market prices a lot of the time. They're not things that are traded, they're missing markets. So actually determining the size of the subsidy, because you want it to be equal to the external benefit if you really want it to be fully effective, that's actually quite a difficult thing to do. And it's where economists get into shadow pricing, which I mentioned in the last video. The allocation of the subsidy may be observed by the producer. So is it cost effective in that way? Are there more effective ways of doing this alternatively, other than giving producers a big subsidy? There's also a lot of rules on this, because we're part of the EU at the moment. This is May 2016, so who knows what's going to happen in a month's time. But we're part of the EU at the moment, and there's lots of really strict rules on giving subsidies as well, because sometimes it can be considered unfair competition with the other firms in the EU. So whether a government is allowed to subsidise a firm may come down to EU rules. And finally, same thing as we had for indirect taxes, but the effectiveness of these subsidies, because they're going to change prices, it's going to be dependent on the elasticity, the price elasticity of demand. So where we have elastic demand, it's going to be much more effective than where we have inelastic demand. So let's just quickly draw these because they're quite straightforward. I'm just trying to get my pen tool here, it wasn't coming up. Here we go. So draw your axes, quantity, price. Even if you don't know what's happening, you just want to draw a big cross on there, but I forgot I was going to do inelastic demand. And then here we're going to have, further down, we're going to have elastic demand. So if I put a similar size subsidy on both of these, so there we go, S1, S1, and there we go, S2. Got to do a similar size here now. I think this subsidy actually on the right is a little bit bigger, but we've got a much bigger movement, we can see, where demand is elastic. And the objective here was to increase the quantity, the equilibrium quantity. So it's much more effective when demand is elastic. So the good students will draw those diagrams and they'll talk about that. The best students will have a go at thinking through the product that they've actually given you, whatever's causing this positive externality or this merit good, and they'll say, is it elastic or is it inelastic? And you'll have to think about all of those type of factors, such as price relative to income, time period that you're looking at, availability of substitutes, whether it's an addictive substance, those types of things as well. So the better students will try and make a judgment of, well, is it elastic or inelastic? So I can't, really say without having a proper example here. A lot of the things we look at for negative externalities, like smoking and alcohol, they tend to be more inelastic, but it's not really clear cut when you get to things that tend to be subsidised, I don't think. Okay, so alternatives for underdone production. We've got regulation, we're going to look at that in another video. We could provide some information or education. If the problem is that people don't realise the benefits, then maybe some education or information would alter their behaviour. Now, this one, it's debatable whether that works or not, depending on what type of economist you are. So the more modern economists take into account that people are thinking about their actions on other people, and they wouldn't go out of their way to try and negatively hurt other people, or they might, do things because it is beneficial for other people. I mean, it does come down to kind of philosophy, is there ever an unselfish act? But the more traditional economists think that everyone acts in their own self-interest. So if there is something like an external benefit and it's only happening to a third party, you may be educated about it, but the more traditional, rational kind of economists would think, well, it's not hurting me, so that doesn't matter. So it's debatable to whether education or information will actually change their actions. Maximum prices, we're going to have a look at that. That can cause a lot of problems though, and state provision as well, which we see with the NHS, we see with the education system, and we see a lot of state provision when the problem's been public goods as well. So those are complete missing markets. These would not be provided by the free market system. Okay, so some of those specification objectives covered, but we've still got a few more presentations to do. State provision, price controls, and regulations till we can finish all of those off.